Should you cut off contact with family members just because they are voting for Donald Trump? Yes. If so far they have not been able or willing to listen to compassion, to listen to kindness, to listen to you, or even to do their own research and discover that hatred's not the answer, that love and kindness is the answer, if they are unwilling to change, they must experience consequences.
Sorry, forgot that. A little goofy. Hello, everybody. Sorry about that. Oh, man. Oh, geez. Our volume is... Oh. Sorry about that. Man, got confused. That was a really big mess. Sorry, I was scrambling towards the end. I had a couple clips I really wanted to get up for the show today, and it took a little bit longer than I thought. And I also moved my camera position, so there we go. Fix that too. Hope you guys are doing well today. Sorry again for the late stream, but since this is a kind of unusual event for Sundays, as I've put out my schedule a couple times now, and I'm not going to be usually streaming on Sundays. However, number one, I felt really bad about not being back faster when I had been trying to get everything sorted out, and then had a couple other things that came up that got in the way. Basically, where's the harm in doing one more? We'll do today and tomorrow, and then the other reason is because starting obviously next week on Tuesday, on Election Day. Oh man, I don't even want to be involved in putting a live stream on Tuesday myself. Which, by the way, I have to thank you guys, man. Once again, I've said this before on my earlier videos on the channel, and that was when the audio was shit. So and now the audio's from, at least my audio from the mic is coming in. I listened to the episode yesterday, and I was kind of floored at how much improvement was just I was able to get just from the changes that I made. Now, caveat once again, I did get a new compressor, which really helped out a ton. But even so, I was amazed by the volume. But more than anything, I looked at the numbers for the streams from before, and I know probably there's mostly people dropping in and dropping out, just checking it out, realizing, oh, this guy's screwing up. Never mind. But the numbers from yesterday, I was like, once again, they're not like groundbreaking numbers for most people, but for me, like, I've never had such a successful amount of viewers, like such a large amount of viewers on any channel that I'd started before. Sometimes I never even reached those numbers when I'd even started the show and had it going for a couple months. And it's like, I don't know if that's a referendum on how bad I was before, or a sign of how much I've improved, but regardless of the reason, thank you guys so much. It's like, once again, I'm nowhere near numbers of a more commonly known streamer, but regardless, for me, it's like a great sign, and it's a real motivator for me to keep going, because I just really, aside from the real big hiccup at the beginning, I've had my total focus as far as occupying my creative process and occupying everything I've been trying to think of for how to do something that was a little bit more productive, a little bit more exciting for me to be involved in that was not just another project that I was just gonna do and it was gonna go nowhere and I was gonna not care about. I gotta turn that. Wait. Oh, I don't even think you guys can hear that yet. I don't think you guys can hear that. Maybe it looks like which is good. The desktop audio was off, but I was hearing it and it was annoying me. Old Jeffrey Marsh up there and his words of wisdom there. Which, by the way, if that's the way you think, you're sick. But anyway, no. But to go back to what I was saying, thank you guys again. It's been a really exciting thing for me to see that that the reception has at least been more or less a positive reception. I haven't got a lot of feedback yet, but when it comes in, I'm more than willing. And as I've said before, I'm not at all such a tightwad that I can't take criticism. I'm not such a tightwad I can't take jokes, and I'm not only going to be fishing for happy, super excited compliments. You guys can say whatever you want. I mean, once it crosses into territory of where you're very mean-spirited, I might give you kind of a in-kind response. I'm not going to throw a big temper tantrum about it, but I mean, good-spirited fun, poking fun at people. I'm a big boy, I can handle it. That doesn't bother me. But if you guys have any suggestions or any requests even about what you guys would want to see in the future, I would be more than happy to hear from you guys, because I'm just kind of winging it at this point and just talking about what has been on my radar and been the most important things for me lately, which obviously is kind of, as I mentioned once, but I don't think it came through, so I'll just mention it again. I made sure to really try hard to make sure I focused on getting this show going before the election. I was like, if I don't have the show going at least before then, it's going to be a huge missed opportunity. It's a great time to at least start and use that as a launching pad to kind of take off from there. But it's also been a double-edged sword because, the only thing dominating the news everywhere is just election stuff, constant election stuff, which is obviously what you would expect and what I expected too. But it is a little tough sometimes to find something fresh. I don't want to just talk about the same election stuff over and over again, which is why today I have something a little different planned, but it's related, but it's kind of going over a subject that doesn't get discussed as much, but I'll get into that in just a minute. I just have a couple things I wanted to bring up before I got going. Like I said, I'll be live tomorrow, and I will be live again on Wednesday. So, like I said, Tuesday, election day, I won't be doing a stream. And I'm sure you guys have your own streams that you guys are probably going to want to watch that day. I don't want to interfere in anybody that is watching their own streams that they prefer. I mean, there's going to be people doing full day reaction and analysis, and for me to pop in and just do my hour-long or 2-hour-long show. This show is meant to be about an hour long, and I've come close a couple times, but most of the time I've gone over pretty badly. But I'm going to work on that. But either way, whether it's an hour or 2 hours, it doesn't really matter on that day. So I'm going to wait until, and then I'll just substitute Sunday for Tuesday, and then we'll keep ourselves rolling on Wednesday. That being said, so subject for today, which by the way, I almost was going to do a Rumble only stream today because I'll just say I couldn't because I couldn't figure it out in time anyway. But I might take the video after it's been streamed and cut out the chunk of it, because I'm going to be going into territory that typically is frowned upon on YouTube, or at least is not exactly the most welcome. But Damn, the thing went out. Sorry. But for now, at least for the stream, I keep it going as long as I can keep it going. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But since new channel with not many followers yet, probably could squeak through and not have a problem. I just don't want it coming back later and kind of biting me in the ass. But then again, I think I've already kind of done enough damage as it is. If it was somebody that really was the typical person to take offense from YouTube videos, but it's the first time I really thought about it, and the reason is because there is this is the part of the election season where normally you would kind of see like everybody hunkering down, getting really prepped and getting really excited to see the results start coming in. But that's not what exactly the news cycle's been about. And we'll get to that at the end because I don't want to make this weird, but there's a couple things that I thought were really important to touch on. One's that, but the first one is I've been sitting on this clip for a while. It's one I've wanted to play because this is the other part of the election that is incredibly vital, especially if Trump gets elected, because if you guys are not really if you guys don't really keep up to speed on what happens in Congress, I can tell you that that the first half of Trump's term was a time for him to be able to potentially get stuff through, but not exactly, because the House and the Senate were both pretty split. When he had Senate and House sort of in favor of Republicans, it was a time where he could have done a lot more, but number one, he was just getting used to Washington, getting used to the things he could do, the things he couldn't do, and as he's admitted several times throughout his campaign at this point, he didn't know anybody in Washington. He was always a New York person, and so he had to rely on people for their input on who he should hire to very, very important positions. And one infamous selection, John Bolton, the warmonger extraordinaire, was one that was, of course, recommended to him. And he joked around with Tucker the other night about how it was kind of a good thing, because when world leaders would see him with John Bolton, they immediately go, "Oh no, he's going to want to start a war with us. Oh my God." That's the reputation of John Bolton. But now this time around, he's fully aware of where he's going, what he's getting into, and has a much better knowledge of who to trust and who not to trust. And what's remarkable too is that he's also going in with people that are, some of them are from Washington, and some of them are from sort of political circles, and some of them aren't. But at least he's got that group around him to keep his to keep his back and his flanks guarded from people who would be looking to try and get inside and make him make a bad decision. But the interesting part that is the main point that I'm getting towards now is that Congress is always, there's always the top ticket, which in a presidential election year, and people discuss these things like, if you have a strong presidential candidate, it's going to help your congressional and your House and your Senate elections to go for the same party. But once again, mineral water. But anyway, I need a little flavor on this actually. But unfortunately, because of how split the country's been, even after 2022, when we had the midterms, there was a shift, but it was a shift that was not much better for either party, really. But it still benefits Democrats because they know how to work with their numbers if they have any possible way of getting a majority. Well, what do I mean? Well, let's go over this. When you look at Republican candidates for the House or the Senate, and not incumbents usually, but when you look at the freshmen or newer arrivals especially, and that's one thing that sucks is that J.D. Vance was a hell of a senator. I mean, I've watched him in hearings question witnesses, and he could get merciless with some of these guys, but at the same time, I think his job is definitely I heard this statement early on when before he had made the pick that Donald Trump Jr. was very much in favor of J.D. Vance, and I was like, oh man, that's a really good sign. That's a really good sign, because I was actually watching J.D. Vance's campaign in 2022, and I was like, man, this guy's really cool. Unfortunately, there was another one, Blake Masters from, I think it was Arizona. Yeah, it was Arizona. Who was another guy who was really a real good, solid candidate that would have been very beneficial to the Republicans too. But unfortunately, Arizona was not exactly favorable to any Republican, including Carrie Lake, who, well, I really hope she wins, because man, she's a firebrand in politics. Man, she's if you've ever heard the conversation she recorded where sort of a Republican leader in Arizona went to her house early in the morning to essentially attempt to bribe her out of running for Senate this year, and it was because it was going to be under Trump. And that was the main reason why they didn't want her to run. They wanted her to run after Trump had his election cycle go through, and then have her run. And she was like, absolutely not, absolutely not. And it eventually got to a point where there was finances discussed, at least by the guy. But she's like, no, there's no amount of money. There's no amount of money. And so I respect the hell out of Carrie Lake. But it just goes to show you that, those things are very important to have in tandem. And they knew full well that this is going to be somebody who is behind Donald Trump entirely, and she's going to likely have a similar political beliefs in general, and she's going to likely vote with a lot of his whatever he would probably like to see happen. But there's a difference, and here's the difference. And I'm going to show you a great example of what Democrats do in Senate hearings for something as serious in this case as a Judiciary Committee hearing, where they're running through nominees for federal judges. I believe it's in appellate courts, and these are lifelong. These are lifelong appointments, unless you are promoted to something like Supreme Court or something, or you're elevated to a higher court. I guess I would think. I think so anyway. I don't think you can be held down in a court if somebody recommends they want you to be serving in a court that may be like the Supreme Court or just a higher court. But I could be wrong about that. I'm not even 100% sure how. The only branch I'm fuzzy on how, because it's always lifelong appointments for the judiciary nominees that are selected by the executive branch and have to come before Congress and get approval, and then once they're approved by both branches, they are on the bench. But it's the only branch of government, obviously, where you have a lifelong appointment. Every other branch of government has elections to nominate. Now, this is something that in our founding documents is obviously done with very specific purpose, which is that they don't want to see judges politicized in the way that candidates are in elections, and they don't want to see it become. That's another reason why instead of people nominating a judge, it's the administration that nominates, and it's the Senate and that confirms. If you remember, I'm sure you guys remember the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, where when I went back and watched Kamala Harris and the way she treated Brett Kavanaugh, that in itself is a sign of like, wow, man, what a president she'd make. But anyway, the bigger point though is that what I'm going to focus on in this clip is you'll see what happens when Democrats want something to happen, and then I can contrast that with, in fact, I think it's said in the hearing, or maybe it's not, but either way, I'll just mention it real quick that if you're familiar with, I've mentioned him, I think last episode, Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. He's a judicial hawk. I mean, he knows he knows the law and the process of the courts and like how courts are supposed to operate. Like he knows everything about the way the judiciary is actually supposed to conduct itself, and the conditions under which someone may be actually, because that's the only way it won't be for life, is if you were so grossly negligent or absolutely incompetent, or there's some serious reason why you were no longer considered capable of doing your job, and you had to be removed. Although, as you'll see, that might not be too big of an issue among some people. But John Kennedy would do the same thing for Republican nominees as well as Democrat nominees. He doesn't really particularly care. He treats them both with the same kind of gravity that you should treat any judicial nominee, regardless of party that nominates, because once again, it's supposed to be the only branch of government that inherently needs to remain nonpartisan, because their main function is to interpret the Constitution and decide cases based on, at least in terms of the federal courts, to decide, like if it's unclear, we need to all discuss the relevant statutes and the relevant rights under the Constitution and come up with a decision based on what we believe the Constitution encapsulates within its meaning in this area. The Democrats, obviously, even in the philosophy there, have a very different idea of how the courts should operate. They kind of have historically, and you may hear this term come up sometimes in terms of judicial nominees or just judges in general, that refer to the Constitution as a, quote, living document. And that's basically just kind of a means to say that, man, that old thinking from back then, it's not really as relevant now. That's not exactly. I can tell you, Republicans are very skeptical of anyone who comes up saying something like that, because they look at the Constitution as an enduring document that needs to be interpreted, but not like reconfigured, I guess is the best way to describe it. Meaning, you don't change the meaning to fit the times. You look at the statute and try to find a parallel in the modern age to how that would be. Like, here's a great example. I'm sure many of you out there have heard one of the arguments for gun control, and especially when it comes to quote-unquote assault rifles, which mysteriously no one that ever testifies in front of Congress seems to ever know exactly what an assault what an assault rifle is. They have no idea. They just know it's the big black scary rifles. And the AR-15 is just so dangerous, even though it's like it's not anywhere near the caliber of something like a M4 or a AK-47. Those are high caliber ballistics, but the point is that like when they talk about the historical reference in the Constitution, there's arguments made that they didn't anticipate these types of modern weapons and how much damage they can do and yada yada. Well, actually, that's not true. They may have been not common at the time, but there's a huge amount of entrepreneurial spirit in early America, including around the time of the founding, and there were also a lot of prototype weapons and weapons that were experimented and were found to be effective, but just never got enough funding to be produced on a wide scale, and so there's very few of them that are out there. But there were firearms that existed back then that actually you could consider even semi-automatic rifles. I mean, or at the bare minimum, like something akin to a SMG with a little bit slower rate of fire, or just a semi-automatic submachine gun type in terms of size, anyway, at least, and caliber. Although they didn't use your typical round that we know today. But the point is that that there weren't just muskets, there weren't just cannons, there weren't just the weapons you see historically. There were tons of different weapons that had widely different ranges of rates of fire, caliber, and they just were not. They're super expensive to where that you couldn't mass produce them for any kind of conflict. But the founding fathers were most certainly aware of them, as many of them wrote about them and actually were kind of big fans of what they were doing. But the biggest thing is that I'm going to put this to rest right now. I've heard this before, and I'm sure you've heard this before if you've ever listened to Joe Biden talk about limits on the Second Amendment. He said it wasn't written so that people could just buy a cannon. No, actually, it's kind of hilarious he uses that, because it shows that he knows nothing about the time of the founding. Because as a matter of fact, during that time period, not only the transatlantic slave trade, but especially in the Gulf area, there was a lot of piracy, and ships would be overtaken if they weren't able to defend themselves. So there was a letter essentially sent to Washington, D.C. to ask, sent to the governing body, essentially, and asking every one of our original founders, we are having serious problems with keeping cargo safe in Gulf due to raids by pirates in the area, and we know the Second Amendment is written so American citizens are able to bear arms. Does that include our potential to have cannons? Because and they're not working for the government; they're private citizens. This is a business outside of the government's actual. It's not a government business. It's independent traders. Anyway, they're just essentially asking, is it possible that we can buy cannons? And the response was, well, absolutely. What do you think the Second Amendment's for? So Joe Biden's whole idea he's trying to pass that you couldn't just buy a cannon. Well, actually, yeah, you could buy a cannon. The Second Amendment was drafted to be able to carry weapons. Now, of course, today we're talking about totally different things. When you're talking about weapons like, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, that's a little different because you're not just hitting what you're aiming at. You're doing far more damage and indiscriminately over such large areas, and that also causes such long-term damage, if not just outright destruction to an area, that's infringing on so many other rights of other individuals. But when it comes to your various types of gunpowder weapons, absolutely, they were 100% behind the fact that, defend yourselves, no problem. So that just wasn't true. Now, this is just an example, but my point is that when you this is why the judiciary exists. When you examine these types of things, that's why gun control has never really gotten footing, because I don't know if gotten's not a word. Never was able to get footing. I'll put it that way, because obviously, if it's at odds with a constitutional right, obviously it's going to not be able to pick up any steam. But through the process I mentioned earlier, where it's filtered through a lens of changing times, and it being a living document that can be interpreted in terms of the cultural norms at the time, and what they are, and what they probably, or whatever kind of terminology they would use, was normal at the time of the signing. So it's just a dishonest argument, and it's not supported by anything in the Constitution, but that's the kind of thing they have to hang their hats on, because, what else are you going to blame? But so that's kind of a broad overview of the gun issue as an example. But when we start getting into confirmation areas, this is where things really go off the rails, because, as I mentioned, I made that mistake yesterday. John Kennedy is the kind of guy who takes his job 100% seriously as a senator, and judges the potential judges for their merits and not for their party. And even during Trump's administration, several judges in the appellate courts were sent back, and it was because the Republicans were like, nah, not this one. This one's just not right. But that's not at all like that. Compare that to what you see in a hearing with literally a nominee for the Supreme Court, and the type of absolute disdain they had for him, as he was a symbol of their loss of power over the judiciary. And this is at a time where they controlled, I think they still controlled the House and the Senate when this went on. It might have been after that, but I don't know. But anyway, no, I take that back, because there's mention of something being in the House that would be considered totally different. And anyway, point being that one side is acting according to the Constitution as best they can. The other side is acting in accordance with what they believe is best for their party, and above all else, that means that they're there to do anything possible to make sure that Democrats are going to perpetually win elections over and over again, and keep all the so-called rights that they've been granted by Supreme Court decisions. Because another thing you look at when you are when you're a member of the judiciary bench in Washington or in the United States is that you look for those cases that have already happened and a decision has already been made. And that's why Roe versus Wade took 40 years to overturn, because the courts don't really just decide, okay, we're going to take up this former decision we've made as a body, and under this new court, we're going to reinterpret it again. They're not going to do that unless a court case is brought before them that brings that question back up. And when it did, that was why, when it comes to the Dobbs decision, it was so intensely polarizing, because I think it was the first wake-up call for how do I put it? I'm sorry, it's not that complicated. I'm just having a hard time remembering the technical terms. Like I said, I'm fairly knowledgeable on what I see, but I'm not always familiar with the actual terms or the statutes or specific text to point to. But I know essentially from the few that I do know, and also while relying on people like, aside from John Kennedy, you have a guy like Mike Lee, who is someone who, he's a Christian, but if he wasn't, I think he might revere the courts. That's how serious he is about the judicial system in the United States, and rightfully so. It's a very unique and important aspect of United States' ability to keep up with everyone on the world stage, because of our, not just our, well, at this point, kind of former, a former influential power, and then you move to, well, okay, here, how about I just do this? I'll go ahead and move to the clip, and I'll discuss it as it goes on, because it's kind of a long clip, but I'll preface this with one thing. So this is a hearing where they're going over judicial nominees for approval, and there's not a long list of, I think there's 3 that are at the beginning. Now, watch the way that Dick Durbin, he's one of these guys that comes off as trying to sound as reasonable as possible all the time. And yet, in every decision he makes, it's always so completely, obviously not paying any attention to any argument by, I guess, anyone at all that could even be potentially helpful. Like, they're not interested in that. They're not interested in, the kind of information that's going to be passing through them. It's just about making sure that it's a Democrat that gets put onto this position of extremely high power. Because, I'll just say right now, one of the biggest things is that well, 2 things, is that they want to have some form of Roe versus Wade brought back and codified into law, so that you couldn't adjudicate the quote-unquote right anymore, because it's literally against the law to do that, unless you want to travel to a state where they maybe, which is not probably a good idea, but where they maybe have the right kind of methods that are similar in quality and in sterilization. Well, not sterile. I'm sorry. I was thinking doctors, not Bush. Same thing, right? No. But essentially, the process you see here is just it's all about sort of a tit for tat thing, sort of like, well, your party did this and this, so we're doing this because that was made the norm. Meanwhile, watch what happens when Dick Durbin and the rest of the United States Senate is giving a speech about how much they care about this individual and how they're going to be a great asset for the Democrats. It's like, well, okay, maybe if they're here long enough and are able to, do exactly what we tell you all the time, maybe then, but and it just keeps getting worse and worse. But that's not what the idea is. The idea isn't that. As a matter of fact, I heard it floated around recently, and I wish this was something I could come up with some kind of what do I call it? Well, let's just play the clip. You'll get the idea when I get to that. So hold on just a second. So this is, I think the date's on it. Give me just a second. Sorry, saw something funny on the screen there for a second. I still see it now. Although a much older one. Yeah. Anyway, okay, I think I got this queued. Or wait, is this the right one? Oh. Yeah, well, anyway, let's just get to that. If I can find it, it should be here. Oh, whoops. I can't find it. Where did it go? I've saved this clip. I actually saved this clip from a long time ago before even the first episode because I thought this would come in handy, and sure enough, it looks like it should. But if I can find it, it has got to be in another folder. I think I'm just looking in the wrong folder. Hang on just a second. Now it's a really long clip, but I'll try and cut it down as much as I can because the other clip for today is also one that's important and I think in this case even more important. So I don't want to take too much time on this, but let me just see if I can find. I don't know why I'm just not seeing. Here it is. Here we go. Sorry, that popped really quick. Sorry. Here we go. Let's make sure that's. Yeah, it's off for now. Oh well, actually, here. Okay, that should help out a little bit. So, let me bring it up and we'll get it rolling. Now, for me to, and just to be honest, in my opinion, I just find this absolutely the fact that these are representatives who, by the way, Dick Durbin has been in the Senate for 40 or 50 years or something. I don't know how long, but he's been in the Senate for a long, long time. And he knows better than this. He most certainly knows better than this. But because he is sort of both doing a routine to flex a little bit and because he's got a chip on his shoulder really bad from several candidates that weren't voted during Trump's administration, and the biggest in particular, but I think anybody that knows anything about this guy breathing a sigh of relief every day that this guy isn't on the Supreme Court, and that's Merrick Garland, because he was nominated during the near the end of the Obama administration, and the main reason he didn't win was because Mitch McConnell actually, in this situation for once, I guess, yeah. Anyway, Mitch McConnell, though, just insisted, no, this guy's just not ready. He's just not ready. He might be a good character, but he's not ready. And so anyway, that's kind of the backdrop of this, is that you see one side kind of trying to reconcile the Constitution and the rights of American citizens versus one who is well, anyway, let's just play the video. We'll get to that. And the point of this, and then I'll explain the point of this as soon as we get done with it. But okay, there we go. Let's switch over to this one. Okay. So, okay. All right, so let's get this started.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to have an opportunity to speak on the nominees?
Yes, we're going to, oh, I'm sorry. We already had done that at great length.
Well, I think this deserves some commentary, given the nature of the nominee, and I'd like to ask to speak on the nomination.
Senator, we've debated these two nominees twice.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to speak on the nomination.
I understand what you'd like to do, but I'm saying that in fairness, we have debated these nominees twice, and I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you're denying us an opportunity to speak on a nominee?
I mean,
Third time, no.
okay, do this.
So
Just
we don't
do
have
it.
a right to speak under the rules?
Listen, this doesn't happen very often.
I'd say no.
So you're just going to make it up?
So, yeah.
I'd like to
There's going to be a lot of
to-
consequences
I'd like
coming
to
here.
speak too, Mr.
You're going to have a lot of consequences coming if you go down this road.
You better
I've
believe
cautioned
it.
you. I've cautioned a lot of you.
The clerk will call the roll.
Listen to me. I've cautioned a lot of you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, don't we get the opportunity to speak?
We're in a roll call.
So you're telling us
though
to shut up?
even though multiple
You
members
want
have
us
asked to
to
speak,
shut up? Is that what you're saying?
A lot of people didn't speak on the two nominees before.
We've done,
Would you raise your hand if you did not speak?
I did not have a
Okay.
Senator Cornyn didn't even have a chance to speak.
Senator Blackburn had a chance to speak.
we've got several folks, Mr. Chairman, who didn't have a chance to speak.
We want to tell you again why these nominees are awful.
Or in Senator Cornyn's case, tell you for the first time. You're just going to sit there and ignore us?
Senator Blackburn,
That's
have you
exactly what
spoken
he's
on
doing.
these nominees?
I've not had the
like
opportunity to
to?
speak. I would like very much to speak on Mr.
Mr. Chairman,
Casaby.
I urge you to let Senator Blackburn speak.
Senator Cornyn as well. Senator Cornyn hasn't had a chance to speak.
That's correct.
I love Tom Cotton in this situation too, man. He's just,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. You can't limit debate without invoking Rule 4. You
listen to
haven't done
Mike
that.
Lee. Listen.
we have debated,
We've debated on prior occasions when we didn't have a quorum. That vote didn't count. We've got people who are here now who weren't
It's a
here
very
then
important point.
who'd like to speak.
Can we speak on the other nominees?
Or is your plan just to end all debate today? Is your plan to end all debate? Do you have an answer? You're going to rely on someone whispering in your ear. What's your plan?
No.
No, we're not. Okay, listen, here's the deal. We worked 7 weeks to trying to solution the asylum problems. You boycotted the committee.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you've left us any alternative but to deny the committee a quorum. I think that's something we ought to seriously
I tell
consider.
you what,
Mr. Cotton says the chairman needs to rethink his decision
Yeah,
and let Senator Cornyn and Senator Blackburn speak. That's what Mr. Cotton says. You can mark that down as my vote.
I like
Yeah,
that.
Everybody over there who's not willing to look at me or look at Dick Durbin needs to think about it as well. Mr. Kennedy wants to speak as well. Mark Mr. Cotton down saying Mr. Kennedy needs to speak too.
I'm waiting to be heard on the nominee. I've requested several times to be heard on the nominee.
So no, I guess Senator Durbin is not going to allow women to speak either. I thought that was sacrosanct in your party.
Aye.
Now here they go.
Chair Durbin, on this vote, the ayes are 11.
The nomination will be favorably reported to the floor.
And
Up next
there you
is
go.
Judge Yumi
There's
Lee,
your next judge.
nominated to the U.S. District Court for the.
He's not done yet.
Mr. Chairman,
Who has not been allowed to speak on that nominee?
Mr. Chairman, you just destroyed
Yeah.
one of the most important committees in the United States Senate.
He's not lying either. I mean,
Chair would note
And you
that-
set a precedent,
that-
which
that's-
will be repeated every time one party or the other takes advantage and takes the low road.
That's-
Chair will note
It
that
sets a
both
precedent
nominees have
that
been
will then
debated twice.
become the norm.
Kashibai and
Congratulations on destroying the United States Senate Judiciary Committee.
Up next is Judge Yumi
That's the
Lee,
point.
nominated to the
That's
U.S.
the point.
District Court for the Northern
Who
District
has
of
not
California.
spoken on this nominee?
Clerk will call the roll.
Will you raise your hand? Look at all these people have never said a word before you make them vote. Never said a word before you make them vote.
Ms. Klobuchar,
Just going along with it.
Mr. Coons,
Just going along with it.
this was a little bit later than I thought it was. November 30th, 2023.
You know, when
Mr.
we were in
Coons
the
said he would
majority,
allow members to speak.
Mr. Chairman, when we were in the majority,
Here's my please.
we allowed Democrats to speak ad nauseum, at great length. We never did this.
Mr. Blumenthal,
Both of these nominees have had 2 opportunities for speeches by members.
Mr., you have to bring them up again. It wasn't our fault. It's your fault.
This is an important point. I'll explain this when this is done.
Going right along with it.
Mr. Welch,
Oh, it's not quite as long as I thought.
Mr. Chairman, I hope you're proud of yourself.
Is this guy talking to Dick Durbin, the chairman?
Yeah, you really have. I don't know what drives this, Dick. I really don't.
Mr. Chairman, is it you driving it, or is it your staff
Yeah, is
driving
Joe
it?
Zogby
Or
the
is
chairman
it
of this
the
committee, or
White
is it
House
you?
driving this? This is completely inappropriate not to let us be heard on these nominations, and you know that.
Mr. Grant,
Your own members have told you to let them speak.
That's another part that's interesting, too.
Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Lee, Mr. Cruz,
Not,
This is a complete
not one person on the
disgrace.
Republican side is even saying no or yes.
Maybe you can share
I see
with
my
us.
colleagues over here who understand what goes around comes around.
I mean, this is so unnecessary to ruin the committee over a political exercise that's going nowhere. Senator Whitehouse,
I would like to, was my name called? I can't hear. Where's that voice?
Was he recognized to speak?
We're on a roll call.
Ma'am,
Mr. Kennedy,
I'd like to speak, please.
We're on a roll call.
Mr. Tillis, Mrs. Blackburn,
I'm waiting to be heard on the nominations.
Mr. Coons,
Is this an illegal vote?
Chair Durbin,
So now Joe Zogby is going to dictate to other senators how they're going to vote?
on this vote, the ayes are 10.
The nomination will be favorably reported. We now turn to nominations that have not been debated before the committee and the committee.
And now we move to the other ones. So let me break this down for you guys in case you haven't ever seen a Judiciary Committee meeting before. There's a term called quorum, which means that the committee is in an official hearing. That means that every senator that wants to or can be present is present. And this is after they've interviewed the nominee and they're discussing their concerns or their arguments in favor of a nominee for whatever reason. And it's supposed to be, obviously, it's supposed to be a sort of back and forth to make sure there's enough time to get out all the information on both sides so that, whichever side of the aisle you're on, the nominee will be afforded the equal and fair amount of time to have each senator go over what they essentially think of the nominee. That didn't happen because what happens a lot in Congress now, especially as we've seen under in the House under Nancy Pelosi and under the Senate under Chuck Schumer, what we've seen time and time again is that they kind of they abide by the rules loosely, but if something is in their favor, they're not going to like deviate from the plan. In fact, they are going to try to take this this strict scrutiny of the rules of exactly what's going to happen. And it's like, well, these are the rules and this is how it has to be, so it doesn't matter that nothing happens. But it's far more important to make sure that this body who is confirming judges, once again, for lifetime positions, that they at least have some time to discuss amongst the Senate judiciary whether or not they feel they're qualified for the job. Now, what's happened here is there's been 2 occasions he keeps referencing that there was an informal discussion that whether it was maybe not even the topic of the meeting or whether it was the topic of a meeting on a different subject, the two nominees were discussed then, and even though you can hear at least half or more of the people who are Republican and on the Judiciary Committee had not even had a chance to speak about the nominees, and this is the official confirmation hearing, you would normally discuss those things on the official day that you actually confirm the nomination. Instead, he keeps referencing the times they informally did, and if you had, say, another committee you were on, which everyone that is in the Senate has, more than one committee that they sit on, and they overlap, and there can be, issues with senators not being present in a hearing they really need to be at, and then there's also times where they can schedule floor votes, because those things are all controlled by the majority party. That's the other thing to keep in mind. So the main point is that you can't say this for sure, but knowing the way that Democrats handle business when they're in the majority, it's very suspicious that you'll have a day where there's important nominees that are up for discussion and up for confirmation, and yet at the same time there's a very important floor vote for certain other committees that's being held in another chamber on the other side of the Capitol, or another side of the other side of the Senate side of the Capitol, to where they have to go there, they have to vote, they have to wait for the vote to conclude and the record to be entered into, and then they can move on to other business. But if there's a situation where there's a couple important things going on at the same time, usually the chairman of the committee, who is the one who will schedule, has the final say of schedule for their committees, will be flexible in the amount of time that they give to anyone who hasn't been able to speak on a nominee before, and make sure that even if because a lot of the Democrats, they're not even going to listen, they're not going to care, they're still going to vote the same way they're going to vote, but they at least respect the process enough to advocate for the idea that these things have to happen this way, because you have to allow them to speak. Because the most important point that was brought up was that just like court precedent, The Senate and the House also operate very often on precedent. And the majority party, that can change. And when it does, if one party has gone out of their way to do something like this and it becomes precedent, well, then anytime the other party feels like just, excluding all the Democrats that didn't have a chance to speak because there was who knows how much stuff going on, and you go in and have the same thing done, and this time on the Republican side, well, then you have precedent for it. And then the next time that the Democrats are in charge, they're going to be so pissed off about that they're going to do something else that's going to blow up. And this is what's so dangerous right now about this mob mentality rule by the Democrats. It's a hive-minded idea. I call it the Democrat phalanx because it's essentially where they all lock arms, put their shields up, and block any kind of rebuttal or any kind of argument against it by just deflecting, not paying attention, and moving on. It's not at all the way that business is supposed to be handled. And if you want to know why the Senate's approval rating is in the toilet, this is the exact kind of reason why. Because it's not about the judicial nominees being of the best quality. It's not about them being impartial and fair in their courtrooms. It's not about, and they'll point to, well, Trump nominated all these judges that overturned Roe v. Wade. Yeah, you know what? Guess what? Ruth Bader Ginsburg said herself that Roe v. Wade was poorly decided. It was not at all based on the sort of the decision was not reflective at all of the constitutional right that it was supposedly referencing in the condition of abortion, and the idea being about privacy, about your medical situations or your medical history and whether you had an abortion or not. That got turned into making it so that, okay, abortion is now legal throughout the entire United States, no questions asked. That's the law. If you refuse to provide one as a health care provider, you're breaking the law. And it's just, it had such a profound effect. But here's the other part that's interesting. I'm not, as I've said before, a lot of people would probably consider me pro-life when they're Democrats, but I actually was pro-choice most of my life, but I've kind of reeled that back so much that most people would probably call me pro-life, or maybe call me a moderate pro-life or whatever. But the truth is that I just see the window should be most certainly shorter than the full length of time of an entire pregnancy, and it most certainly should not at all, as I've said before, be a situation where, like has happened in a couple states now, where if a child is attempted to be aborted and survives the abortion and is born alive, if you put a law in the books in your state that after that, as Alex Jones said, the baby will be kept comfortable and a discussion will be had between the mother and her physician. Meaning, after the child's born, it'll be kept comfortable while they decide whether they just leave it for dead or not. I mean, that's how far it went. And so the idea, it's radical to allow states with very different values and very different, ideas about when a child should be considered at a stage where it is no longer moral to, it's beyond a question of morality at all to abort that child. Not to mention that if you feel incapable of taking on the responsibilities of having that child at that point, there are options like obviously adoption or other government related services to help you if you are just unsure still and you don't know if you can and you're afraid and you need help and maybe you're a single mother, and it's like there's so many other options, but they don't want to promote those. As a matter of fact, the what are they called? Pregnancy resource centers, I think they're called. Anyway, they're centers that attempt to convince mothers who are considering abortion to reconsider, and if they don't change their mind, they accept the decision and allow them to go to a clinic to have their abortion. But if they change their mind, they immediately begin providing as much care as they can provide to the mother for whatever they need, whether it be food, whether it be clothing, blankets, whatever it might be. They try to provide as much as possible. Not to mention, obviously help from counselors and other medical providers to make sure that the baby's kept healthy and can be raised in a stable environment and so on. But Elizabeth Warren went so far as to say these are fake clinics with doctors that aren't certified to be making these kinds of decisions or something to that effect. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. That is a disgusting argument, first of all. And secondly, how are you gathering that from a clinic that is just attempting to, because it got, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's so strange to me because I did not know this. I had no idea it was this bad, that the reason Planned Parenthood is looked down so negatively by people on the right, and in particular religious people, is that they immediately see a woman come in who's pregnant and not only kind of expect and kind of just assume and move her into a room where they're going to discuss planning for an abortion, but if they say they are not sure, they almost do the opposite and try to convince them that they should. And I don't think either one of those things, I think it's fine to discuss that with them. I think it's fine to encourage them to keep it if they would like to. I don't think you should be normalizing the idea of abortion so much because, when you look back to, everybody's been talking about this lately, finally, I'm glad. It hasn't really sank in entirely, I don't think, but when Bill Clinton specifically spoke about abortion and it being legal, the concept was that we need to treat this at least with the significance of what it is. It's a potential human life that over time will certainly be born, unless there's a serious complication, will be born, grow up and become an adult human child, or a human child. It will become an adult human, and you have the opportunity to have that happen, or you have the opportunity to say, no, I don't want that to happen. But there's so many other factors in these situations that they don't discuss. Especially when it comes to what are your reasons, and how did this come up, and how long has it been since you've since conception? And what bugs me more than anything is that it seems like more than anything now, the most radical leftists are all of the mindset that this is more like a just an alternate form of birth control than literally ending the life of either a potential new human being or as some people believe, just a human life, period. And I'm not sitting on either extreme, but I will say that when you have a society that celebrates abortion amongst leftists to the point that they will literally throw a party with cake and beer and ice cream and everything else, because of nothing more than terminating a life through abortion. I'm sorry, that's just sick. That's not somebody who is concerned they aren't going to make a good parent. That's a person who's concerned that they're actually going to have to take responsibility for once in their life, and do something that they've never been asked to do, which is grow the hell up, accept your responsibility, and either take care of it yourself or do something else other than wait till the last minute to. I won't discuss it, but do something incredibly barbaric to kill the child in the womb, and walk away from it like it's just you just had a tooth extracted. It's so off the. It became so far over the edge, and it's just. That's where really I began to look at this like, this is sick. I have nothing wrong with someone who is taking birth control or is trying to make sure that they're staying safe. And if you're sexually active, okay, you're sexually active. Make your own life choices. I'm not going to decide that thing for you. But I will say that when you do nothing at all and then you get pregnant and you say, oh, well, I'll just have an abortion, I think that's pretty despicable, and I think that there's no excuse for it, because there's so many other things that could be done. And by the way, no matter what you've heard about Donald Trump and Project 2025 and all this other stuff, I don't care what Project 2025 says. Trump has never said anything about it other than it's not his work, it's not his foundation, it's not anyone associated with him. He doesn't even know what's in it, but it doesn't reflect his plans for his administration, period. So that you can't pin that part on Trump. And there's the overwhelming amount of citizens I've heard from in multiple interviews seem to have a similar agreement about when it becomes kind of crossing a line to terminate a pregnancy. And it's usually around the end of the first trimester to around the midpoint of the second trimester. And that's usually around where most Americans sit. The idea of abortion for any reason up until the moment of birth is something that almost everyone always goes, oh, no, I don't support that. I guess maybe unless, and they always throw out the caveat, unless the mother's life is in danger, which of course everyone agrees with, that's when you have to make a very, very difficult decision, but it's understandable. If you have just been running around and were too lazy or too wrapped up in your social circles to prevent a child from forming and developing nerve endings and its spinal cord and its brain and all functional organs, and then you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, now I want to abort it. Like, you should have known that someone like that, first of all, should have known right from the moment they knew they had conceived a child that, oh no, there's no way I can do this. Meaning, there should have been plenty of time to have the procedure done. And also, by the way, I'm not, saying that people can't travel to other states where it is more laxed and there are more rights for, whatever reason to be able to have an abortion. But I think the idea of, at the bare minimum, if you are in a state where their values is so far removed from the values of a much more liberal state, then you're just going to end up essentially making it so that there's no taboo that's too far. There's no reason that should not be respected. Women have a right to their own bodies, and I guess the baby's body is also their body. I don't believe that one because and don't go off on the dependency thing if anybody's out there, because trust me, it's like the dependency argument is like it's not a child until it's out of the womb and no longer is dependent on the mother. I mean, I could go on about that for a while, but I won't. But I'm only on abortion now because when that was sitting before the Supreme Court and the decision came down, leftists all went crazy, but they blamed Trump for nominating these nominees that overturned Roe, but none of them expressed any kind of radical view of it. They weren't saying that abortion is now going to be illegal throughout the United States. They never said they had any intention of doing anything of the sort, nor did they have any intention of limiting contraception or anything else like that. They had the sole intention of letting states make their own decisions on their own abortion laws. That's not that radical. I'm sorry, that's just not that radical of a position. What's radical, especially if you compare it to worldwide countries that allow like abortions with exceptions, there's only a couple that are as completely laxed as ours, and they're not the kind of company we would want to keep on a general basis. Like, just for example, North Korea is a good one. So yeah, it's situations like this. You have to have a serious nominee. You have to have a serious judicial philosophy and understanding of constitutional rights. And there's just no... oops. Sorry. I've noticed something else. There's no way you can read any of that and believe that this is some kind of draconian ban of abortion across the board. It's just not. It's just, when you go that far, that fast, and then you see how things like this kind of come to pass, where, you have this hearing right here, you can go back to the Brett Kavanaugh hearing and have a woman make an accusation who has no idea of the time, place, who was there, who wasn't there, other than insisting that Brett Kavanaugh's at this party, going through his yearbook to find anything that sounds incriminating and use that against him, and just the lengths they go to in those situations. It's absolutely it just makes me completely I don't know, I just became very disillusioned with the whole thing. And it hasn't changed my views on abortion itself one bit. I just didn't know. I never believed that there was this kind of viewpoint that was so prevalent, that it was really seriously something that they were willing to almost literally go to war for. Maybe literally go to war for. I don't know. Now that they got Dick and Liz Cheney supporting the Democrat Party, who knows? No, I'm just kidding, but I'm not really, because they can justify any kind of death and destruction of a country or its citizens, regardless. But that was why when Trump was able to nominate Amy Coney Barrett before the end of his term, tons of leftists came out and were incredibly angry. And what was anyway, but yeah, once you start making those decisions, it's like okay, like the idea of the American Congress, of both the House and the Senate, was to vigorously debate on topics and to stick up for the belief that you have of your own. Man, why can't I? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, once you make those arguments, it's just like, and then you call someone like Brett Kavanaugh, or you call the actual vehicle that you drive over here in, or whatever. I don't know why I'm bringing up the vehicles in this situation. Case in point. the whole thing is just like a strange manipulation of events, but the goal is very obvious. It is that they want to use every possible avenue they have the capability to do to it's hard to just find the words for it, but like when that's your position, I don't know how to come up with anything that I would find a let's see I just don't find the arguments compelling at the slightest. They're just, once again, they're just excuses. Now, so all of this was going up to say that several senators and several members of the House are it's just propaganda. It's just propaganda, pure and simple. I mean, there's nothing else you can describe it as. It's trying to get people scared to believe something, and so they will vote the complete opposite, even if that opposite is something that they know is probably not the right thing to do, even in their warped mind. But somehow it's still completely appropriate and something that you should be willing to accept because it's a law of the land. Well, no, it was Supreme Court precedent set in place by the judges that were there at the time, and also because of losing my train of thought. But you get the point. I hope anyway. I hope I kind of made myself clear on that one. But the real point is that if you want a good glimpse at how impartial debate becomes so heavily just like split almost by what's the word? Split up between each other for the sake of I don't think I'm anyway. The precedent that they set is going to be followed by the next group that's in power, and I don't think that that other wheel manufacturers, as far as their wheelbase and their anyway, so that's part one. That's part one. Just and this is just to illustrate that while the presidential nominee is one of the most important things that you can vote for in the United States, so that you can it's man, I just keep going around in circles. It's hard for me to talk about even sometimes, but I'll just leave it at that. I think that, and I'll probably touch on this one more time before the election, but because I grew up listening to rock bands and metal bands and punk bands who all understood this concept, and so when I heard about this overflowing neighbor of everyone's talking about, anyway. So there's one more thing I'm going to go over, but this is the one I was a little worried about. I'll roll with it anyway. I've also had YouTube come in and essentially not have in stock what I was looking for, but wait, hold on a second. I think I'm confusing two stories. But let's go back to the basic one. That okay, that one has that on there too. Anyway, sorry about the side tangent, but that is how you are sure to not, but and to not just that whole thing, it just got so completely out of hand, and people are going to make decisions based on vengeance on both sides of the aisle, whether you like it or not. And it's just one of those subjects where, like, how can you dismiss it out of hand so casually as if it's just writing down a grocery list? Like, it's so it's so infuriating and so nerve-wracking and so just and I just don't see why that's a hill that's really worth dying on, metaphorically speaking, of course, but that it's seriously just one of those subjects where it's so complex. Even if you're the slower ones, they do have a strong electrical field, which I'm bumping into the mic. Sorry. But anyway, so that's point number one. Now, point number two, and I'll try and go over this real quick because once again, not only am I a little worried about this, and if I have to cut it out on YouTube, I have to do that, but I'll let you guys know if it does need to be removed, and if it doesn't, anyway, maybe, wait, hold on, how long are we done? Because it is a Sunday, mind you. Well, here, I have a better idea. I'll look at it this way. I'm sorry, this was a very informal show today, and I know it's a little weird, but I was thinking about these things for the last few days and trying to figure out a way to at least introduce them, because there was it was like stuff coming in just once again at the last minute, but given the nature of the election coming up, I just thought, okay, this is important stuff. But you know what? Maybe I'll save this next piece for tomorrow, because it's not related to abortion at all. It's still related to the Senate, the House, and the White House, but it's not about that particular aspect. And I could focus on the technical, and next episode I could focus on some of the more on the ground consequences to some of the more difficult situations, to say for sure what's barbaric and what's not, and like it's just it's just a messed up. It's just messed up. And under Roe v. Wade, it wasn't going to even be challenged, let alone overturned, until you had justices. And mind you, the only Democrat that I know of that is, well, passed away, but had nothing to do with children. She loved children. She loved her children, and it should be more or less left at that. But it won't be, because everybody's looking for a new vector of attack. Everybody's looking for a new way to nail somebody on their beliefs. Go ahead. Well, never mind. Anyway, so how long have I done? Let me check. Yes. Oh, that's right. It's on two sources, so I got to check those. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, we did a long time. Yeah. Okay. I'll save the next one for tomorrow. And just to kind of hint a preview at tomorrow. There's been a lot of strange stuff going on in these in particular in these states that are going to be the swing states that really have been focused on for most of the election season, as pivotal to both campaigns to make sure they win them. And you would expect that, of course, but unfortunately what you have here is kind of a last gasp for this kind of idea that we expect that the ability to vote is important right for all American citizens, and you got your Jamaican clean girl. But anyway, so the subject is essentially on when you hear in sim racing in this case, so it's meant to be as good looking as it can, but I prefer hang on just one moment, let me take this, I'll be right back. Okay, guys, sorry about that, but we're gonna end anyway. That was just bad timing. But anyway, yeah. So that was probably. Sorry, I went over that much slower than I wanted to, and I was I should have prepared a little bit more, and I apologize. I was not exactly thinking exactly what I was going to do today. I just was it was kind of a last minute decision, but. I do think it's important to kind of go over this part because it doesn't get talked about much about the importance of voting for your representatives in Congress, because as you can see, these things are really, I mean, they're not in very good shape, to say the least. There's so much tension between the two parties, and it's easy in judgment for your own party to say it's their fault, but until we can stop pointing fingers and start actually putting it behind us to work together as we're supposed to find something that's not ideal for either side, but is something that both sides can live with, then we'll have a much better situation for essentially everyone. But that's something that's beyond the scope and scale of what the President of the United States is capable of. So that's why it's such an important thing to make sure you know where your representatives stand, even if you would prefer a different candidate. At the bare minimum, you can at least send them some angry phone calls or tell them exactly what you think of legislation they're trying to pass, and no threatening stuff, obviously, but like just stating how if you truly feel like the legislation they're trying to go for is really not good in terms of its result, and you totally disagree with it, then it's something that you have to handle that way. But at the bare minimum, it should be something that people can look at and say, that's a great representative for me. And more than anything else, if you want an administration, whether it's Donald Trump or any other presidential candidate that you care about, to be able to have a shot at actually persuading and passing legislation that goes through all three phases of the House, the Senate, and the White House, then you're going to have people that are willing to negotiate but are also willing to compromise. And that's something that, in particular, not to pick on the left, but this sort of line in the sand posture that they've taken, like in that situation, that kind of thing really needs to stop, because all that does is just escalate things higher and higher and higher until no one gets what they want. And so that's basically that's my public service announcement for the day, I guess. But anyway, so once again, sorry for the strange sort of impromptu show today. I wasn't 100% sure on this, but I am so glad I did it. Little abnormal, but that's fine. But tomorrow I will be on for one more show before the election. It'll be one more show, election eve show. So, I'm yeah. Who knows what the hell's gonna happen this year? I can't even imagine. We've had so much unusual stuff happen this cycle, but all I can tell you guys out there, if you're feeling nervous, just steel yourself and get as much resolve in place as possible, and also if it don't go too deep into don't go too far down the rabbit hole at this point in time. Like, try to keep it above level so that you can get some air if you need to. Because that's the best metaphor I can come up with, because right now people just stay entrenched in this so long, and one thing I've noticed a lot of lately is just the straw man arguments, the kind of debates where it's just misrepresentations of another person's arguments built on just layers and layers of hypotheticals that lead to one another, where by the time you get to the end, it sounds nothing like the original idea of the person you're debating, and that's all done in bad faith, and it's also done because some candidates just require a good campaign consultant and essentially don't know a damn thing about how to promote themselves. They just rely on all the information from someone else, and that's pretty stupid, but that's what it comes to. So anyway, but yeah, guys, that's that. I'll leave the rest for tomorrow, but until then, have a great Sunday afternoon, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. And until then, have a good one. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you then. Peace.
I can't read it. There's no words on it.
Okay.
There's no words there. To play us out. What does that mean? To play us out. What is?
For credits.
I don't know what that means. To play us